Welcome one and all. This is WESN Content Capital Face of Sports. Today, we want to look at what transpired at the Commonwealth Youth Games 2023. Remember, Trinidad and Tobago would have hosted these games. There were 7 disciplines. Joining us to talk about that and to talk a little bit more as well in what we should do going forward after what many describe as one of the most successful Commonwealth Youth Games ever. Those are not my words, those are the words of many of those who would have participated from an official level. But as I said, joining us to discuss that is the immediate past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, Brian Lewis. It was Brian Lewis, it was his brainchild, together with 3 young ladies. They worked together, Chanel Young, Quincy John, and Reza Grant. The 3 of them worked together with Brian Lewis to put together a plan that was finally accepted by the Commonwealth Youth Games Authority. But Brian Lewis is here, he can explain it better than myself. Brian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Andre, and greetings to your viewers.
Brian, first of all, the acceptance that people have stated openly that this was one of the best Commonwealth Youth Games ever. How do you deal with that?
Awesome is the words. You know, we Trinbagonians are sometimes our most harshest critics. So the reality is that a lot of the positive comments have come from the foreigners and the visitors. The Commonwealth Games Federation President, Dame Louise Martin, is quoted as saying to the international media that it is one of the best Commonwealth Games ever, that the opening was one of the best ever, and the overall, the comments from the foreign teams, the managers, it's all over. You can, social media these days, and all the comments from the athletes has been amazing. They've used words such as amazing, awesome, fantastic, magical, spectacular. And that's a credit to our entire ecosystem of people.
Are you surprised by the outcome in terms of the final outcome, final product that was produced by Trinidad and Tobago?
No, okay. Because, so that is not a really simple answer.
I know, it's okay.
There are elements that were wow. The bottom line is, way back in 2018, when the vision and the seed and the dream and the idea came about, I understood why it made sense. I understood what were the elements that we already had that would make us deliver an awesome Commonwealth Youth Game. There were doubters, internal and external, and that's not meant as a personal attack. I find sometimes that we take things too personal, and therefore we aren't able to objectively analyze things and focus on what worked well and what didn't work well, and we have to learn from. But I also understood the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. What was our magic button, for want of a better word, as a people? And that was carnival, emancipation, and those were important elements. Tobago. Because if you ask the Trinbagonian, you say carnival, what are your thoughts? Of course, you'll have people who are not interested, but in the main, carnival, emancipation, Tobago. You know what's the word that comes up a lot, Andre? Freedom. Because if you think about it, carnival is that expression of freedom. Emancipation is the historical perspective. Yes. So carnival touched upon the cultural elements, and that incorporates the steel band, our music, our food, etc. And emancipation captured the reality of our history. Even at times we we live in denial about it. So we have problems when people say carnival mentality, we take it as a negative. And then Tobago, for most Trinidadians, is peace, a freedom from the hassle and the rat race, etc. And then also, from a beach and sand games perspective, Tobago had enormous potential. So when we sat down and we talked about it, and you mentioned them, Quanis, John, Reza Grant, and Chanel Young, shared the idea, discussed it. They were given the ultimate responsibility to build out the bid concept. And they did that. Of course, there would have been the usual back and forth. And I mean, it wasn't always smooth sailing, Andre.
Yeah.
There were moments they will tell you when I may not have been their favorite person because I pressed hard. But I must say also at that point, having thought about it in 2018 and we went through the process, as you know, through to 2019, the bid presentation, everything, there are a number of elements that had to be put together. And two of the important support at that time came from the Ministry of Sport. The Minister of Sport, Shamfa Kujo, who had, if you go back to 2018, had not too long come into the position, if you recall, right? She, from day one, bought into the idea, the concept, and really championed it within the government, within the cabinet. And then internally, we had support, I must say, from Secretary General Annette Knott. Even though she may have been at times, but she was all in terms of providing that support, because she's one of the, if given the opportunity, she's one of the best sports administrators in the country. And she was there, you know, guiding certain elements. But certainly, enormous credit must be given to Quanis John, Chanel Young, and Reza Grant. I tell people, if I have to explain it best, it would be a creative process. So as an entertainer, calypsonian or whatever, you have an idea for a song, you might have the melody in your mind and the lyrics, but for it to become a road march or a hit, you need a producer, you need a studio, you need an arranger, you need a musician. So it can't happen alone. So in terms of Trinbago 2021, which then became Trinbago 2023, there was that. And then when we went and did the bid presentation, and of course we had, back then we had to have meetings with the THA. At that point it was Jomo Pitt.
Yes, I know
right?
Jomo Pitt, yeah.
Again, very open and receptive, you know, in terms of the Tobago component. And then we had to go and do the bid presentation. There was the evaluation. We also had the support back then of the then CEO, Chief Executive Officer, David Greffenberg, and a former CGF driver of games and supervision in John Eads. Locally, in terms of the TTOC, we also had support, because you always have to have people supporting in the background, and that would have been Lovey Santana and Stacy Santana, and at that time, Lauren Legal, who was employed with the TTOC at that point in time. Any omissions is not deliberate, it's just the factual reality at that point in time, in terms of who at that point in time may have bought into the company.
Before we go to our first break, initially, these games should have been held in 2021.
Yes.
You would have been the president still at that time.
Yeah.
2 years later, you're not the president. Hold that thought of how you feel. We take a short break, we'll be back. This is WESN Content Capital Face of Sports. Welcome back. This is WESN Content Capital Face of Sport. Brian Lewis, the immediate past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, is with us, and we're talking Commonwealth Youth Games 2023, a review of sorts. Brian, yes, you would have been the president at the time, by the what happened obviously with COVID. in 2021, the Youth Games was supposed to be held then. It was held now in 2023. You were not the president. How did that feel, having done all this groundwork and not being the president?
I didn't feel any way. You know, it actually was a choice and an understanding going in because of term limitation, etc. And then I was approached to, and it's no secret within the TTOC and the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic movement, I was approached to consider seeking an amendment to extend the term of president for another term because of the truncated situation with COVID-19. But I declined because I'm a firm believer. I'm still a firm believer in gender equity and the Future is Female initiative, which I would have started, and the governance aspect of term limitation. I did appreciate and do appreciate that it may be better to do like the IOC and FIFA and World Athletics and FINA and go to 3-term limitation because of the nature of the ecosystem. But certainly I found it would have been immoral and unethical for me to do that at that point in time, so I chose not to.
How does that work? You raised that point. So you can only be the president for 2 terms?
2 successive 4-year terms.
But you can return?
Yes, if members so wish.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. So, okay, so you can't be the president for 2 successive terms,
No.
but there can be a break and you can come back.
If asked, yes. If asked,
you can come back for 2 more terms. There's
yes,
no limit
if asked to consider. In any position, you can do that. The only position on the Olympic Committee that is not term limited is the Secretary General position.
Which I should tell people is where Brian Lewis started. He was at first his secretary. Am I right, Brian? You were the Secretary General?
I eventually got to that, and then I chose, because of my firm belief in term limitation, to step down, run for the president.
How long were you the Secretary General for? How long?
8 years. It's still
8 years,
term
right, the
limit,
term, right.
which I was told that, you know, it was my choice, so the expectation at that time, 2013, was that I would lose, and therefore I'll be out of the movement because I had made the choice. But that is how, funny enough, and I had supported her. Mrs. Annette Knott became this first ever Secretary General in the history of the TTOC.
First female.
So in a way I've had a...
First female. First female.
First female.
Yes. Yeah.
So I've had a hand in those 2 historic moments. But, so I didn't have an issue. Also, I had confidence in the talent and the potential that was there, especially in terms of the creativity, the innovation, and the groundwork had been done. And I'm a big believer, Andre, in that once you set a strong foundation for something, when it is well thought about, it can withstand turbulence. So even something like the visuals of the game, that work had started with Ken Henry. And a lot of the positive comments about the game came with a huge demand for the merchandise. That was the work of Ken Henry. He was the person also who took the idea of the 8-year-old for the mascot and made it into a full-fledged mascot, Ken Henry. We had back then initiated meetings with Valmiki Maharaj for the opening ceremony. We had meetings with the then CEO of the Commonwealth Games Federation, David Grevenberg, and Dame Louise Martin when she came here. So what happened now with the changes and the rescheduling from 2021 to 2023, the process now had changed a bit, but it turned out again that even with the new process and 3 people had to bid or whatever, that Valmiki Maharaj and Ultimate Event came out. Again, you would have heard the comments by the foreigners in particular that it was one of the best opening ceremonies ever. I know that some of the locals may not have been as happy as they could be, and you would want them to be, but that's life. We had the use of the pan version of the anthem all over, although the plan in the original bid was to have all the countries' anthems played pan version. So whether it was Australia or whoever winning, not just Trinidad and Tobago, it would be played in the pan version. I am told that didn't happen because of budgetary issues. I would have seen that as an investment in a different perspective,
Sure.
but by that point, you had Douglas Camacho was the chair of the local organizing committee, which they did as best as they could. The local organizing committee would have comprised Douglas Camacho as chair. First it was Ephraim Serret, and then around May, so it was changed to Douglas Camacho. It also would have included Dan Henderson, the now president, Annette Knott, Secretary General, Rhea Richardson, Vice President TTOC, Ephraim Serret, Vice President, Kyron Serret, Manager Business Development at Sport TT. Most importantly, George Leacock, who was the chairman of the Tobago Task Force of the LOC, and you can't discredit that Tobago was a high point of the games, as was the intention. You had the volunteers. So a lot of things came together to put on a good show. You know, if you had to look at one of the elements that could have been better, it would have been the marketing and the promotion and communication, because at that point in time, the intention was to really make it into a spectacle of entertainment. And certainly, for those who felt passionate about the games and supporting the games, it wasn't a good feeling, notwithstanding the covered stand was filled, but because of how the cameras were positioned, it wasn't a good feeling that the world would have seen 15,000 empty seats. But all of those things really would have been about the strategic marketing and communication plan. So I think that is one element, hopefully in the conversations that review the game, we would look at and see that could have been done.
Is there going to be a review of the games or
well, I certainly would have, that must happen. I don't know what is the current position. And you see, you have to be these things while the iron's hot. You know, because people will have different views. And throughout my tenure as leadership in anything, I always welcome productive conflict, constructive, destructive, mean-spirited criticism, because it gives you a totality of views and perspectives. But all in all, Trinbago 2023 ticked the important boxes from the perspective of Trinidad and Tobago as a sport destination and sport tourism destination. I don't think, honestly, even with the budget of 35 million TT, when you look at the kind of positive coverage and positive imagery over 70 countries, I don't even think, if we had to quantify and monetize that cost, the Ministry of Sport, Culture and Arts would have been able to foot that bill, because it would have been significantly more in terms of huge markets such as India, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, England, Australia, Singapore, Brunei, Nigeria, across the Caribbean.
There were 7 disciplines that you mentioned, both in Trinidad and in Tobago. I know a lot of people have spoken highly, and I want you to touch a little bit on that, on Tobago in particular, the new service for sports in the region that has been established in Tobago.
A new?
The new service, in terms of the sand service, obviously the sand coming in.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So the idea of positioning Tobago as the beach and sand games capital of the hemisphere was always an intention in the original vision and bid. And I think that has happened. There was the usual Trinbagonian theatrics and drama. But it turned out that the Black Rock Beach and Sand Games facility complex was up and ready. You had the Shore Park complex where for the first time they had a Fast 5 netball, but the facilities, the mat that was there for years was finally rolled out. So in that regard, I think the critical aspect, just jumping ahead, is that the authorities across the board, sport company in particular, the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Arts, must pull together to leverage now on that momentum that has been created by, as far as the international community is concerned, Trinidad and Tobago has put up its flag as a sport tourism, sport event destination. We have now a cadre, a cohort of volunteers and people throughout the system that ought to have learned from the mistakes. And there were many, but that doesn't take away from the spectacle. Whether it's a Hollywood movie that wins an Oscar, it's never perfect. And we hosted a multi-sport games for the first time ever in our history. It's not easy hosting a multi-sport games, but we did it. So what needs to happen now is that I think as a public service commitment, every media house in the country that has an interest in sport and the power of sport to motivate and inspire young people and children should play the highlights of that Commonwealth Youth Games, Trinbago 2023, for the entire year. They were one of the few things that would happen this year, regardless of anything else, that is as significant and powerful and profound than that. That Trinbago 2023 showed the best of Trinidad and Tobago, notwithstanding
all the problems.
All the problems.
As we go to the 3 o'clock news, when we come back with 3 o'clock news, Brian, I want to talk a little bit about the events themselves. We captured 15 medals, Trinidad and Tobago. I want to talk a little bit about the achievements in terms of those 15 medals. Did any surprise you? Did none surprise you? And then more importantly, at least for me, more importantly is we have the World Championships taking place right now in Budapest, Hungary. And people are looking at it and looking at the 18-year-olds and the 19-year-olds that are participating. Of course, the Commonwealth Games was for under 18. So are we seeing enough young Trinidad and Tobago athletes? And I'm not only here talking track and field. I know I said the World Championships, and that's track and field. But are we seeing enough young athletes coming through, Brian Lewis? And if not, why not? Those are some of the questions that I want you to answer after the 3 o'clock news. As we look at the success, yes, 15 medals is extremely good compared to what we would have achieved previously when we participated and we were not the hosts. But as we all know, being the host many times, not only for Trinidad and Tobago, for any country, when you're the host, everything elevates, whether the performance, the athletes, there's an extra energy. Yes, the crowd were not what we wanted it to be, obviously. We expected more persons to be there, but as we identified, the marketing wasn't what it could have been. But that's to be talked about a little bit later. We'll take a short break. You've got the 3 o'clock news next here on WESN. When we come back, we continue talking with Brian Lewis. We'll be back. Welcome back. I've got Brian Lewis with me here, and we just had an interesting conversation, but it's not a conversation for anybody else to hear, so I can't tell you what it is. Anyway, back here, WESN Content Capital, Face of Sports. And Brian, when we left, we were talking about the fact that Trinidad and Tobago earned 15 medals. Track and field, cycling and swimming dominated the medals.
Right.
First of all, your thoughts on those 15 medals?
Awesome. I mean, we have moved from 6 medals over 6 editions of the Commonwealth Youth Games to 15. Now, I've been asked, well, did you anticipate such a success? Certainly, I would be lying if I said we predicted we would get 15 medals.
Sure.
What I can say is we factored in the conversation the fact that at home, there's always this uplift. It has been shown over time with every game that have been held in a country, Olympics, Commonwealth Games, World Championships, whatever, that the home team gets a lift. Additional, we had world-class facilities such as the cycling velodrome, the aquatic center. At the point in time, the plan was to use the cluster at Obolon, but that shifted to Hazley Crawford in terms of Trinidad. There you go. And in fact, the original plan was Dwight York
Stadium for the track and field.
But it changed to Hazley Crawford. But we anticipated a lift, in particular in what is called the time sports, rather than the team sport. We always knew that it would be a struggle, especially in rugby sevens. We could maybe have anticipated a good performance, but then netball shifted to Fast 5, which really was a new format to be introduced here, and I'm not quite sure the netball was working on Fast 5. That in itself is something that I also have a little challenge with, I have to say, because I would have thought that, and I remember talking to sport leaders, that when we made the original bid, and even if it was cancelled, the fact is that whether Trinidad and Tobago was going to really get the option to host the game, there was going to be a Commonwealth Youth Games somewhere. Because remember, we were up against Gibraltar, and Trinidad and Tobago was not considered a safe pair of hands. So I always felt, COVID or no COVID, we should have had a plan in place. That didn't happen. And that had an impact. And I'm not going to be afraid to say it here. So we got 15 medals.
Right.
Who knows if it could not have been more? Why I say that?
Why you say that? You could answer your own question.
Why I say that? Because I was a little disappointed by the team numbers.
Okay.
Because I felt while, yes, there are critics, many of them talk about it's not about development, it's not about participation. That was never the intention in the original bid for host this game. It was anticipated, like all other games host, we would have the largest team.
Because it's certainly a lot cheaper to host, to have a team in your country.
That's the irony of it, but I wouldn't get into that.
No, right? It's a valid, it's a quite valid point.
There were, I heard that there was a focus only on a high qualification standard and an emphasis and the concept, people used statements that the TTOC would have made, 10 goal, 20, 24, and all of these things,
right.
to say that, in other words, they kind of put it on TTOC in terms of the narrow selection. And I honestly felt that was a lost opportunity to give more young people
No, I'm agreeing with you.
the opportunity to represent their country using the advantages of home.
I did not know that was the basis. I am very perplexed to know that was the basis for the lack of numbers.
If you look at the composition of the Trinidad and Tobago team in numbers, as compared even to Bahamas, as compared to, just relative here, when you're playing with numbers, you have to be careful. Okay. And let me say, this is not intended to be a personal criticism on anybody. I would say it as an observation of someone who was part of the original bid contest.
And just for clarity, Brian, because people get mixed up in Trinidad and Tobago, these selections of individuals in the various sporting disciplines comes from the NGOs. Is that a fair comment?
The NSOs nominate.
The NSOs, yes.
Nominate. The TTOC will have the final say based on an agreed criteria. Okay. So I'm saying it is very easy in this circumstance to play the fool and to be disingenuous, as opposed to saying, okay, while we don't want to embarrass the country because the public and media will be very harsh on the athletes, I think when you talk about development for CAC games and other games, it is ludicrous to say that you have an opportunity to host a Commonwealth Youth Game and you will go in narrow. Now, I do accept, that's life, that swimming, for example, will point to the fact that they only had 2 athletes, swimmers, and how many medals they got. So it is easy after the fact. But unless you had a crystal ball.
The experience. I'm agreeing with you 100%, Brian, because I want to say that's what I hear. And
let me tell you why I appreciate that. Folks, you know why I appreciate that? Andre Errol Batiste has been one of my most fervent debaters on the question of participation, development,
I remember that debate
and
more than 15, 20
the importance of representation at a high performance level.
Yes, because he bring me in out of the fact of the matter is I agree with my philosophy, which is performance at the top end. World Championships, yes, no disagreement. But in this case, it's the Commonwealth Youth Games, and in particular because it's being hosted in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, swimming, for instance, yes, the two persons won a lot of medals for Trinidad and Tobago, but it would have been good to give the others the experience, and I want to use this as a point. Usain Bolt went to the Olympics with the Jamaican team and did not participate, but he went. They carried him for the experience. He ran with the guys in the training camp and do all kinds of different things. He was involved. Get the feeling of being there. He wasn't good enough at the time. They always felt so, right? They always felt he wasn't good enough at the time. This was an opportunity, certainly swimming, to give some of the young swimmers a chance. They could again knock out in the first round. Track and field the same way as well. Cycling the same thing as well. This was an opportunity.
But
it was missed, a lost opportunity.
Because who knows what may have happened in the relays.
Yes. No, lost opportunity.
And again, and this is no fault
good point.
of the TTOC and the TTCJ in this case.
Yes.
I'm saying they could only
NSOs.
work with what the NSOs have.
Yes,
now, I'm saying that if we wanted to talk about participation and development is not important, well, shouldn't be the focus, then we would not have put forward a Rugby Sevens team. Because we know at this level, that's a #1 sport, right? But you can, and there's a team up there, you can, exposure is important. So that is one of the aspects, in addition to the marketing and communication, that I personally would have felt very disappointed in.
Very good point.
But that being said, because as I said, who knows, we could have had a couple more medals, because the same thing that drove those 15 medalists would have possibly driven other athletes.
It would be interesting, and I'll do some research to see, since the Commonwealth Youth Games has been established, if Trinidad and Tobago as host has had the smallest
Well,
team.
you can look into that.
I can check that, and
Right.
I almost certainly might be right, so I'll check it.
But I do know in 2017, additionally as a show of support for Bahamas, we sent one of the largest teams, right? I'm saying, if you're thinking about a long-term athlete development framework, and now it's great to see JC Foster, and I mean, I've been part of that delegation.
Yeah,
but,
explain that, because people listening might not know what you're talking about.
but so the Ministry of Sport is best positioned to explain that. But it is about, it goes back to the conversation with the Prime Minister of Jamaica and the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago about a year and more ago about collaboration in terms of sport. So the concept of it is strong because JC Foster and the Jamaica system in track and field,
Yes.
right, is way up there. But I was telling somebody just yesterday, what I found was very interesting with a lot of the comments coming out of this, is that the Olympic Committee, way back in 2005, and give jacket under the then president at the time, Larry Rumani, had focused a lot on long-term athlete development. We had brought in a lot of experts. We have had constant workshops. And in the transition under me, we brought in the Michael Johnson performance.
I remember that.
We have a high-performance coordinator in Anthony Macano. We run ongoing programs, tap into Pan Am Sports program, all built around long-term athlete development perspective, which when you break it down is what JC Foster is talking about. The element of having trained, qualified physical education teachers throughout the system. So I'm absolutely glad and supportive that having JC Foster here and having that exchange with, in particular, primary and secondary coaches is a focus, because sometimes you need to hear a different voice. You need to see people who have succeeded. So in terms of track and field, from a Caribbean perspective, credit to Jamaica. The point I'm coming back to is that our athletes across the board would have been inspired by being at home. And you heard Nikolai Blackman and Zarek Wilson and the track and field athletes, the cyclists, talk about hearing the crowd chanting, "Go Team TTO." And I hope one of the things that come out of this is that Trinidadians and Tobagonians will develop a true sporting culture.
You really think that will happen?
Yeah, because
Why? Given what you
why
know about
then would we
given
have-
what you know about the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, that they forget something maybe within 2 days or 24 hours.
I agree with you, and that's why I said earlier on, Andre, as a public service commitment to the power of sport, to deal with crime and obesity, to do with socialization, that I would like to see all the media houses, as a public service commitment, run highlights of that successful Commonwealth Youth Games Trinbago 2023 for the entire year.
Okay, so now let's talk about what should come next. The Commonwealth Games, Youth Games has finished. What should we do next with some of these young athletes, even those who may not have been selected for one reason or the other? What do we do now, Brian, to continue this development? Because we're seeing the rest of the world is not waiting on Trinidad and Tobago. I'm drawing reference to the World Championship. I'm just drawing reference to track and field in particular right now. But I'm sure it exists in cycling and other sports as well. Whereby the 18-year-olds and the 19-year-olds and the 20-year-olds are on the world stage challenging. And we are stuck with the older athletes. Not that they're doing badly, but we are stuck with the older athletes, and I'm wondering when they leave, what will happen?
I think it is an enormous credit to the athletes who continue to press on, notwithstanding the perceptions of lack of support and lack of a system and structure, and the fact that they have had to do it in spite of. an important element coming out of this, not just for the 7 NSOs or NGBs and sport company in particular, and the TTOC, there needs to be a meeting of the minds in terms of what our targets and objectives on the high performance. So Brian Lewis is now the immediate past president, so that fool is off the grid. So is it that 10 gold medals by 2028, 2030 to 2036 is now the target? Or is it that forget about gold medals? We're not in the gold medal business again. That is an important thing because you have to have an objective that you are aspiring to, right? If I was intimidated, and I say this about fear of contradiction, if I was intimidated and bullied by the naysayers and critics, we would not have pressed on with the idea of hosting the Commonwealth Youth Games in Trinbago, then 2021. We would not, because of fear and all of this stuff. And that's a credit again to the Honorable Shamfa Kujo, Mrs. Annette Knott, Secretary General, Quanish John, Chanel Young, and Reza Grant, and all those who have supported and brought it along to them, including the local organizing committee, the corporate partners, etc. Right? So what happens now is, are we prepared to make the commitment? And why I say that, you quite rightly, and I see the members of the
Boy Wonder is about to
talking and complaining about what's happening and why we're not performing. But I want Trinidad and Tobago to understand that it takes 10 to 15 years to develop an Olympic level and world level athlete and champion across the board. I use athletes here in a general sense. It could be swimmers, it could be football athletes, it could be netball athletes, it could be rugby athletes, athletes in the general sense. So what you're seeing now, even with West Indies cricket, is the result. You have to go back 10 to 15 years. This is no magic thing where you walk out the road and like you buy a lotto ticket and you could buy a world champion and an Olympic champion. So the challenge we face with now is, if we use this Commonwealth Youth Game, is do we continue investing in their development? Do we continue investing in the talent identification? Because the reason why some of the national sporting organizations limited their team selection was because they did not do talent identification when the idea of the games came up in 2018, because they were too busy criticizing and laughing. They have been too busy criticizing and laughing about 10-24 gold.
Do you feel, Brian, based on what you said, do you feel that during that time, while you were the president, and this 10 goal by 2024 came about, that you didn't get the full support of the NSOs?
I know I didn't have the full support of the NSOs. I know that there were skeptics. I know there were those who didn't believe in it because the athletes told me that. And I remember telling
so
a couple...
So the athletes told you that themselves?
I remember telling, listen, anybody, I'm not going to call the athletes' name, but I challenge these NSOs to a public debate. Some of the prominent people, I challenged them.
They're still there?
Huh?
The persons in authority at the NSO
No,
that they passed on?
No,
it wasn't a hard question. It was a very simple question.
Beat me up on that. No,
I'm not beating you up.
I'm not. All I'm saying is...
They're not there. They're still there. All right. No, it's okay.
What I'm saying is, and this is not with no mean-spiritedness or bitterness, because...
The main sport in Trinidad are track and field, cycling, swimming. All right, go ahead.
No, you have football. Football has never prioritized like the other big football nations.
Yeah, but football couldn't win no gold medal.
No, wait, listen to what I'm saying, Andre.
I'm trying to think about those who were in a chance to win a gold medal.
You're very right. Jamaica won a medal in CST. The point I'm trying to make.
No, but no Olympic gold medal.
No, you're not. Listen to what I'm saying.
You're trying to get me off track and trying to figure out who
not.
are the NSOs.
No,
and
I'm
I'm saying there was track and field. I am dealing with something else. I'm saying there was track and field, and there was cycling, and there was swimming.
And I'm going to include football.
You include football.
And other team sports. Because in the countries, for example, if you put football, Brazil and all these countries prioritize Olympic qualification.
I agree.
The South Americans prioritize going to Pan Am Games, CST Games, because they see that as a critical component of their development system.
It is a progression. No, you're 100% right. In fact, just to prove your point, I don't know why I'm trying to do this, but just to prove your point, Spain just won the Women's World Cup. Spain, when they won the Women's World Cup, that's about a week ago, in fact last week Sunday to be exact, when they defeated England by 1-0, they became the first team in history in terms of women's football to have won the Under-17 World Cup and the Under-21 World Cup. So they now hold all 3 titles.
Right.
That's just an idea.
So I'm saying from a talent identification perspective, right? But so I remember, as I said, all along the line when athletes would come to me, I would say, listen, I will be the bad guy. You all feel comfortable to aspire to be an Olympic champion.
And I know that for a fact, Brian, that many of the NSOs did not like the assistance that was given by the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee to many of the athletes, because they felt that the athletes circumvent them for one reason or the other and came to the fund that we work for, basically, for assistance.
That may very well be so.
You don't have to comment. I just said my opinion.
Many of them would not have conveyed their opposition to it personally to my face.
Yes, of course.
So I can't say for what would
have
happened.
But they would have personally to me, so I'm speaking personally.
Therefore, so if I did you what you just did me.
Which is what?
Are those people who told you that still involved?
Some, yeah. I'm not afraid to say it. What's the big deal?
All right, take
I answer that very easily. If you tell me it, and it's not a secret because they tell me it openly, you didn't tell me in confidence.
No.
So it's okay.
People are very thin-skinned.
Yeah.
And you have to leave them. But my point has always been, you can't be involved, and what they do is that they play into the criticism people give, that you're only on trips.
Yeah.
Because if you are not aiming to be your best and to do your best at an Olympic game, Pan Am Games, Commonwealth Games, CSC game, then what you're going for, I've asked that question, then you're really going for a trip on a vacation. And the thing that happens most times, I see it all the time, is that they throw the athletes under the bus or the team. You very rarely hear an NSO and its representatives put up their hand and say, we did not prepare the team properly, or we did not give the athletes the support that they needed.
They would never say that.
You ever heard them say that?
No, I've never heard them say that. Even if it's true, they never say it.
Correct, but it is about accountability. And taking the responsibility. People are not going to crucify it for it, but they will probably ask you, okay, what are you going to do different? And then they put the blame on corporate Trinidad and Tobago, everybody. But I'm saying, you did not articulate a goal. So what are we doing? I have never heard a top football team, and I'm sorry to be using football,
it's okay,
say that they don't have an aspiration to qualify for the Champions League, or to win the Champions League, or to win the Premiership.
Even if they think they can't see it.
Even if that's right, you have to energize people by setting a big goal, but also articulating a plan. Okay, so it don't work out, you take your blows for it, and you say, okay, this is what we have learned, and we'll do better. So what I'm saying is, the whole conversation around where we are. So
where we are, where we going here?
Where we going? Huh?
Are we going anywhere?
You know.
Or how fast are we going? Are we walking? Are we at snail pace? Are we at such snail pace that countries will continue to pass us?
Well, I could only, let me put it this way, and it's not me being diplomatic. if it takes 10 to 15 years to develop an Olympic level athlete and a world champion, all we have to do is work back to see what systems and processes are in place.
But are these symptoms in terms of improvement, apart from Jehud Gordon and Christian Walcott, are these symptoms to do with locally based athletes as against overseas based athletes? And I use those two names particularly because they have had success, one on the Olympic stage and one on the world stage while training locally.
I believe that while there is room for significant improvement, we produce up to the Carifta level in track and field. If you look across the board in a number of sports, team and individual and time sports, we do well. If you look at swimming, we do well at CCCAN and these games. We come home a lot of times, even with non-Olympic sports, at the junior level with a bag full of medals. But the transition, what happened? I don't think that I think we can do more in terms of the transition. But because it may be a matter of a comfort zone level, a lot of our NSOs focus on up to the Carifta, up to the junior level. And then we depend on, depending on the sport, the NCAA system to pick it up. So if it's in track and field, you get a scholarship. If it's in hockey, football, you get hockey even. I said hockey.
Yes.
Hockey, football, you get a scholarship and you go. So it's no secret that those sports tend to have a more defined pathway.
Swimming, I guess, as well.
Swimming too, than others. We have not been able to develop, like Jamaica in terms of track and field, a home-based elite level program like a MVP and a racers, to name two. The track and field people will best be positioned to tell you why. Swimming may be a little bit more challenging. Cycling will have its unique challenges in terms of it's a very expensive sport. So if you look at where our success would have come over the years with that, not in a general term, there have been talents, so you go back to the Roger Gibbon, the Jessane Phillips, but even in terms of Jessane, he has gone abroad, where Gene Samuel, Michael Phillips, the UCI, within recent years, you cannot discount, notwithstanding the criticism. And that's another unique thing about us, that we are very quick. We have a lot of experts here who are very quick to criticize.
Experts in anyway, all right.
No, we have experts. We have people who have done a good job to a point. But they are very critical of when the athlete across the board needs to go to a different level. So again, I use, for example, the idea of school system. You go to primary school, the primary school teachers don't fight to hold on to you. You go to a secondary school, and then you go to university, and you don't get the primary school teacher trying to hold on to
and it's a valid point. And you know it's a valid point. For instance, we see it a lot, and to me I see it a lot in track and field. We have one young lady that was really good at a young age, and in between a certain age, maybe from 15 to 18, she fell off completely. And she was once a champion in the region, and she has just fallen off. And some people have accredited that to the fact that the local people didn't want to release her to go abroad. And you wonder why they're holding on to this. Why? Is it because they see this as a gravy train? What is the rationale?
Well, I don't know how it could be a gravy train if the athlete has plateaued.
Well, in their mind, maybe they didn't think the athlete would plateau, but they have.
Again, if you look at football, again, we're coming back to football, right?
Yes.
If you have a talented footballer, whether it's in South America, Africa, anywhere, you transfer them.
Right, but I want to, I had a discussion with some people recently. The reason for that simply is, besides the fact that the football people are obviously a little bit smarter, is that FIFA's put in these rules whereby now,
They only put it in now.
yeah, within the last 5 or 10 years in particular,
whereby the academy development.
correct, academy development. So that's how it doesn't matter where you come from, you will get money. If the further that player reaches, you get a percentage of the money, and it must come down. It comes down. It starts from the school, the academy you're in, the first club. As you go up and you get money in the transfer fee, part of that money comes to the club or the association. So they want you to progress. They encourage you to progress because they're going to benefit. That doesn't happen in the other sports, unfortunately. So, for instance, a coach in Trinidad and Tobago was a young athlete that is doing extremely well, and he thinks if they go abroad and let's say they go by Michael Johnson, and Michael Johnson excels with them, everybody will forget me. That's the thinking, and I'm not saying it's wrong.
I don't necessarily subscribe to that, because what I have seen across the board is success follows success. So you look at, if you take track and field, if you look at any club that is perceived as being successful, they end up with large numbers. Track and field, you could call a number of clubs where their perception of success has driven, well, at a point in time, I don't know what has happened post-COVID, large numbers, whether it be Memphis in track and field, Abilene, Cougars, Concords. I'm saying success will follow success. And if you have the credibility and the trust that Andre Errol Batiste is very good at developing good footballers or good athletes or good swimmers on the basis of the program that they have, in terms of the basics, etc., people will follow that. People will want to send their juniors there. And most of the clubs, they have membership fees. Of course, you have to. So I'm saying people have to look at it differently. You can't retard somebody's, it is criminal even to take somebody and have somebody who has talent and cause that talent to tank. Because what you are now doing is that you are subjecting that young talent, whoever it is,
yes, of course,
whether it's football, cricket,
sure,
rugby,
yeah,
to a life of. Because if they have not been able to fulfill their potential to monetize their talent.
I wonder if these people have conscience. Anyway, we have to go. So as we go, what message would you send to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Brian Lewis? The Commonwealth Youth Games are just being completed. Not just being completed, but completed on August 11th, that's about 14 days ago. What do you say to people of Trinidad and Tobago now?
Well, the message I would like to send coming off of the back of the Commonwealth Youth Games Trinbago 2023 success as an opportunity to raise the positive profile of Trinidad and Tobago is I would like people to not just focus on the 15 medals, but to focus on the power of sport to make a positive difference in the lives of youth and young people. Sport is not a cure-all, but sport can make a positive difference in addressing crime, obesity, at-risk behaviors, social deviance, and sport provides a pathway now. In the modern world, sport and the sport industry is a legitimate career.
Brian Lewis, I want to thank you very much. Brian Lewis, the immediate past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, talking to us here on WESN Content Capital, Face of Sports, about the Commonwealth Youth Games 2023 and other matters thereafter. We take a short break. We will be back.